Helen Montrose wasn't a loud woman. She didn't take up space. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't talk over people. Her whole life, she believed in being gentle, useful, and kind. And that's exactly how she raised her son, Ethan. She had him young, raised him almost entirely alone after his father passed unexpectedly, and poured everything she had into making sure he had a better life than she did. She worked at a local florist for years. Quiet hands, strong back, warm smile. She never bought much for herself, but when Ethan needed shoes or a laptop for school or money for rent in college, she found a way. Always. Years later, when Ethan married a woman named Lauren, a woman from a wealthier family with polished clothes and a perfect social smile, Helen did what she always did. She welcomed her in with kindness. She stepped back when needed. She stayed polite. She helped clean up after dinners. She never overstepped. When Ethan and Lauren got their first real house, a beautiful 2-story place in the suburbs, they invited Helen to move in. She had planned to stay in her small apartment, but Ethan said, "Mom, it doesn't make sense for you to live alone anymore. Come stay with us. You'll have your own room, your own space. We want you here." Helen agreed. And for a while it was good. She cooked dinners some nights, helped with the garden, took care of the dog when they traveled. She was useful, and that made her happy. But slowly things changed. Lauren started to act distant. She stopped eating what Helen cooked. She made comments that weren't exactly rude, but weren't kind either. Like, "Oh, that dress is so classic." Or, "You're still using that old phone? That's cute." Then it got worse. Lauren started locking the laundry room without telling her. She said things like, "You really don't need to clean. We have a service for that." And one day, Helen heard her through the door whispering on the phone, "She's sweet, but sometimes it's like having a ghost in the house. I wish Ethan would say something." Helen didn't say anything. She never did. Instead, she stayed even more quiet, even more helpful, even more invisible. Then came the party. Lauren was hosting a large business gathering, influencers, investors, colleagues, clients. A curated evening, she called it. The house was clean top to bottom. A catering service arrived. The living room was turned into a lounge space with LED lighting. The dining table was covered with gold-trimmed name cards. Helen watched it all from the hallway. It wasn't her world. She knew that. She was just happy to be around people. She walked up to Ethan while he was checking on the wine glasses. "I can help with anything if you need," she said gently. He looked at her and hesitated, then glanced toward the kitchen, where Lauren was watching. "Actually, Mom," he said, "can we talk for a second?" Helen followed him into the hallway. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her eyes. "I was thinking maybe tonight, just for the party, you could stay downstairs. In the basement. Just for a few hours." Helen blinked. "The basement?" "Yeah," he said. "Just until the party's over. You don't have to come up. It's just, some of the people coming are very professional. Lauren says it's important for the vibe." Helen looked at him quietly. "I didn't think I needed to be part of the party," she said. "I was just going to stay out of the way." "I know, Mom. I know. But it'll be easier this way." She paused. "Because I'm not someone you want seen in your house?" "No, it's not like that," he said quickly. "It's just image stuff, that's all." Lauren stressed. "You know how she is." Helen smiled gently. It was the kind of smile that hides deep pain. "Of course," she said. "I understand." She went back to her room, quietly folded the dress she was going to wear that night. A simple gray dress with a lace collar. The one she wore to Ethan's college graduation. She folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer, sat on the edge of her bed. Downstairs, she could already hear the team setting up tables and trays. Ethan never came back to check on her. Lauren didn't speak to her at all. Helen stayed in her room until it got dark. Then, when the music started, soft at first, then louder, she took her small plate of food and went down to the basement. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just did what she was told. Because she wasn't angry. She was disappointed. And in that silence, something inside her began to shift. The music from the party echoed through the ceiling like a reminder. Helen sat at the edge of the small cot in the corner of the basement, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. The walls around her were unfinished, exposed pipes, concrete floor, a single bulb flickering overhead. This wasn't a place meant for comfort. A table had been set up in the far corner for storage, cluttered with old boxes, out-of-season decorations, and folded chairs that hadn't been used since before Lauren came into the picture. Helen looked down at the plate Lauren had handed her, a paper plate with one small sandwich, a handful of crackers, and no napkin. It wasn't the food that hurt. It was the message: you're not a guest. You're an inconvenience. Upstairs, she could hear laughter. The sound of glasses clinking. Someone giving a speech. Someone else cheering. The bass from the music was low but constant, vibrating slightly in the walls. She glanced at her phone. No messages. No missed calls. No reminders that she mattered to anyone in that house. She remembered, just a few weeks earlier, how excited Lauren had been talking about the guest list. People from the firm, a few influencers, maybe even my old client from LA. It's going to be so classy. And Helen had smiled and said, "If you'd like, I can bake that lemon cake again. The one Ethan always loved." Lauren had replied, "Oh, that's sweet, but we'll have professional catering. We want everything to feel high-end." She had said it with a smile. But Helen heard what was underneath. "You're not part of this." She had let it go. She always did. But now, sitting alone in the basement while her own son threw a party directly above her head, pretending she didn't exist, something inside her began to ache in a new way. It wasn't just sadness. It was something quieter, deeper, older. It was the ache of being erased. Helen stood slowly and walked to a dusty shelf near the stairs. On it sat an old box marked legal papers. She had never shown it to Ethan or Lauren. They never asked. They never cared to know. She opened the box carefully and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were copies of documents she had kept safe for years. The deed to the house. The original sale contract. Tax statements in her name. The truth was simple. Helen owned the house. When her husband passed, she sold their lakeside cottage. The money went into buying this home, the very one Ethan and Lauren now lived in. She let them move in rent-free so they could build their lives, save their money, have stability. She didn't ask for a contract. She didn't need one. She was their mother. That was enough. Or so she thought. Now they treated her like an unwanted guest in a home she had paid for. And they didn't even know. The bass beat from the music shook the floorboards again. Helen closed the folder and sat back down. She wasn't angry. She wasn't going to yell. She wasn't going to embarrass anyone. But she wasn't going to sit in the shadows anymore. That night, while the party roared upstairs, she sent a text to Daniel Harper. "Hi Daniel. It's Helen. I think I may need your help after all. Do you still have a copy of the deed I filed with you?" It had been years since they last spoke. Daniel was a retired lawyer and an old friend of her late husband. He replied within 10 minutes. "Of course. Are you okay?" She stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "I've been better. I'll explain everything tomorrow." Hours passed. The music got louder. Guests laughed. Someone spilled wine. A woman screeched with joy. Ethan's voice rang out clearly, saying, "We're so glad to have you all here in our home." Our home. Helen sat with her hands folded, staring at the ceiling. She smiled faintly, not from amusement, but from clarity. He truly believed it was his house. Lauren certainly did. They never once thought to ask about the paperwork. They never once looked at the name on the mailbox. They assumed. And now they were comfortable with the idea of her being small, silent, tucked away like a storage box. She looked at the dress she had left folded in her room, the one she wore to Ethan's graduation. She hadn't put it on tonight. She wasn't allowed to. But tomorrow, she would wear it again. Because it was time. Not to fight. Not to shout. But to stand. Later that night, when the party finally died down, Helen heard footsteps above. The click of high heels. The closing of doors. The quiet hum of the dishwasher starting. No one came to check on her. No one knocked on the basement door. No one even said goodnight. She lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence stretch out until it felt like peace. The next morning, while Ethan and Lauren slept in, Helen made herself tea in the kitchen. She sat in the sunroom and sipped it slowly, wearing her gray dress, her hair neatly brushed. And when the doorbell rang, she already knew who it would be. Daniel Harper, holding a folder under his arm and a look of quiet concern on his face. She opened the door and smiled. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Anything for you," he replied. "You ready?" Helen took one deep breath. "Yes," she said. "I've been ready for a long time." Daniel Harper had aged since the last time Helen saw him. His white beard was fuller now, his step slower, but his eyes were still sharp. He had been a close friend of Helen's late husband, and years ago, he helped Helen file the paperwork when she bought the house. Now he was retired, but not done, especially not for her. They sat at the small kitchen table as the early sun warmed the room. Helen placed a fresh cup of tea in front of him. Daniel opened the folder and laid out the documents, the deed, notarized copies, a recent printout from the county records, all of them showing the same thing. Helen Montrose was the legal owner of the home. No co-owner. No mortgage. No mistake. Are you sure you want to do this? Daniel asked gently. Helen nodded. I'm not trying to humiliate them. I just want them to remember who built the floor they're standing on. Daniel understood. We'll do it exactly the way you want. Helen smiled. Then let's start. That day, while Ethan and Lauren were out finalizing last-minute party details, Daniel filed the ownership verification form with the county office. It wasn't a new filing, just a reaffirmation. A public notice. He also made a call to a colleague who managed event contracts. By noon, the staff helping with the party was instructed to list Helen Montrose as the property owner on all catering and event forms. No one questioned it. After all, no one really knew whose name was on the deed, except now it was officially clear. By 4 p.m., Helen had taken a shower, ironed her dress, and put on her pearl earrings, the same ones she wore at Ethan's graduation. Her hair was softly brushed, her eyes quiet but steady. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm around. Instead, she calmly walked upstairs and began setting the table. The one Lauren had said was professionally arranged. Helen removed a few pieces and repositioned them slightly. Not out of rebellion, but because this was her house, and it was time it looked like it again. Lauren returned home around 5 p.m. and spotted her immediately. What are you doing?" she asked. "Just adjusting a few things," Helen said with a smile. "I think the table was a little off-center." Lauren blinked. "You're not supposed to be up here right now." Helen looked at her calmly. "I live here." Lauren opened her mouth, but no words came out. Before she could respond, Ethan walked in carrying 2 wine bottles. "Oh good, you're back," he said, looking at Helen. "Do you need anything downstairs? We're going to start soon." "I'll be here," Helen replied simply, smoothing the edge of the tablecloth. Ethan paused. "You mean upstairs?" "Yes." He frowned. "Mom, we talked about this. It's not personal, it's just not the right crowd for you." Just then, the doorbell rang. Daniel Harper stepped into the room. Ethan turned, surprised. "Daniel?" Lauren stiffened. Daniel smiled warmly. "Evening. I'm here at Mrs. Montrose's request." Ethan laughed awkwardly. "You mean my mom?" "No," Daniel said gently. "I mean the homeowner." The room went quiet. Ethan blinked. "Wait, what?" Daniel pulled a sealed folder from his leather bag and handed it to Ethan. Inside were all the documents. Ethan flipped through them quickly. Lauren peeked over his shoulder. Her face went pale. This house is in her name," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel replied. "It has been since the day you moved in. She used the money from the sale of her husband's property to purchase it. Your names have never been on any legal record." Ethan's mouth opened slightly. "She never told me." "She didn't have to," Daniel said. "She trusted you to respect her without needing to." Helen stood still, her expression calm. Lauren took a step back. "Why now?" Ethan asked, his voice thinner than before. "Why are you doing this now?" Helen looked at him for a long moment. "Because last night," she said, "you told me to hide in the basement in the house I bought." Guests began arriving. One by one, luxury cars pulled into the driveway. Well-dressed professionals stepped out, holding wine bottles and gifts. They were greeted by staff who said, "Welcome to the Montrose home, owned by Mrs. Helen Montrose. Please make yourself comfortable." Some guests paused. "Wait, Lauren's mother-in-law?" Others smiled. "We love that." Elegant older woman, very chic. Lauren's face flushed. She stepped aside, fixing her makeup in the hallway mirror. Ethan didn't say a word. Inside, Helen calmly greeted guests at the door. She didn't put on a show. She just smiled softly, like someone who finally stopped hiding. Some guests asked, "Are you the host?" She replied, "I suppose I am." They loved her instantly. The moment that sealed everything came during dinner. The guests sat around the long table, sipping wine, laughing. Helen sat at the head of the table. Lauren had no choice but to sit on the side. Ethan sat across from her, unusually quiet. One of the guests raised a glass. "I just want to say, this home is beautiful. It feels warm." Lived in. Real. Not like those showroom houses. Someone else chimed in, agreed. Who designed it? Helen smiled. It was built with memories, not money. They clapped. Lauren tried to force a smile. Near the end of dinner, Daniel stood up and raised his glass. If I may, he said, I'd like to give a quick toast to a woman who spent her entire life helping others, without asking for anything in return. And tonight we get to finally see her, not in the background, not in the basement, but exactly where she belongs. At the head of her own table. Helen smiled. The room erupted into gentle applause. Ethan lowered his eyes. Lauren excused herself to the bathroom, but never came back. Helen didn't gloat. She didn't rub it in. She simply sat tall. For once, the house felt like hers again. Not because of power. Not because of ownership. But because she had taken her place, not by force, but by truth. The night ended the same way it began, with Helen sitting in the same chair, the one at the head of the dining table. The guests had left, still smiling, still talking about the surprise twist of the evening. Some thought it was bold. Some called it iconic. But most of them just respected her. Not for owning the house, but for the way she handled everything, with grace, calm, and quiet strength. The lights were dim now. The kitchen staff had gone. The air smelled faintly of vanilla cake and red wine. The music had stopped. And finally, after avoiding her for hours, Ethan came into the room. He didn't sit. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes down. Helen didn't look up right away. She sipped her tea slowly, then placed the cup gently on the table. I didn't mean to embarrass you, Ethan said quietly. Helen looked at him. No, she said. You just meant to erase me. Ethan winced. Mom, it wasn't like that. She raised an eyebrow. Wasn't it? He sighed. Lauren was worried about how it would look. The party was important to her. To us. Helen nodded slowly. And I was what? A risk to your image? He didn't answer. She stood then slowly, carefully. Her gray dress still perfectly pressed. Her pearl earrings still in place. You know what I did last night? She asked softly. Ethan shook his head. I sat in a cold basement, she said, her voice calm, and listened to my own son laugh with strangers in a house I bought for him, while pretending I didn't exist. She paused. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't want to shame you. I just wanted to see if you'd realize it yourself. If even one small part of you would come downstairs and say, Mom, I'm sorry. Ethan's eyes glistened, but he said nothing. But you didn't, she added. You went to sleep. There was a long silence. Then finally Ethan spoke. I don't know why I let it get this far, he whispered. You were always there. Always helping. I stopped seeing it. I got caught up in everything else. The house, the business, the expectations. And Lauren. She made it easier to forget, Helen finished for him. He nodded. Helen didn't cry. She didn't need to. Because now, he was the one feeling small. He walked toward her slowly and sat down. I don't want you to go, he said. Helen tilted her head. I never planned to. He looked up. So what happens now? She sat back down across from him. That depends on you. Ethan leaned forward. What do you mean? She folded her hands. Do you want your mother in your life? Or just the image of a successful man with a perfect house and no history? He didn't speak right away. Then, he said something Helen never expected to hear. I think I forgot what love without conditions looks like, he said. And now I remember. It looked like you. Her face didn't change, but her eyes softened. 2 days later, Lauren packed her things and left for her sister's place. She didn't fight. She didn't say goodbye. She just left a note. You've changed. And I don't think I can keep up. Ethan didn't chase her. He spent the next few days in silence, not sad, just still. Helen returned to her quiet morning routine. Tea in the sunroom, watering the plants, reading the newspaper with her glasses slightly tilted. One morning, Ethan came and sat next to her. I want to fix this, he said. Helen looked at him gently. Then start by seeing me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a framed photo, the same one she had given him years ago, taken when he graduated college. She was standing beside him in the photo, proud, radiant. He placed it on the windowsill. I want it where I can see it, he said. She smiled. A week later, Ethan hosted a small dinner. Not a party. No guests with designer bags. No music loud enough to shake the floors. Just 5 neighbors. A few old friends. And Helen, sitting at the same head of the table. Only this time, as the guest of honor. They toasted to her. They asked her stories about her past, about her job at the flower shop, about the recipe for her lemon cake. And this time, no one told her to stay out of the way. Because she was the way, the one who had cleared the path, built the foundation, and held the roof up over everyone's head. Weeks turned into months. Ethan became quieter, more grounded, less polished, more present. He and Helen spent afternoons playing cards, cooking together, taking slow walks around the neighborhood. He started asking about her past again, things he hadn't cared to hear before. What was your favorite flower to work with? Did Dad ever cook, or was that always you? Do you miss the lake house? And for the first time in years, Helen told him everything. Not because she needed to, but because he was finally listening. One day, while sorting old photos together, Ethan found a picture of Helen in her 20s, hair tied back, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, laughing. He looked at it for a long time. You were beautiful, he said. I still am, she replied with a wink. He laughed. And for once, it sounded like the boy she used to know. That night, Helen sat alone at the kitchen table and looked around the house. Same furniture, same floors, same walls. But now it felt different. It felt like hers again. Not because of the deed, not because of the power, but because finally, she wasn't in the basement. She was seen. She was heard. And she was home.